was a time when storing your gold in the vaults of the Federal Reserve in New York was the financial equivalent of putting it under Superman's pillow. Safe, trustworthy, untouchable. But that time, it seems, is slipping away. And perhaps nowhere is this more relevant or more urgent than in Germany, where officials are now preparing not just for financial instability, but the possibility of war. According to a joint assessment by Germany's Federal Intelligence Service and the Bundeswehr, the Kremlin is laying the groundwork for a large-scale conventional war with NATO by the end of the decade. Russia is rebuilding its military capacity, testing NATO's resolve, and treating the West as a systemic enemy. Despite heavy losses in Ukraine, Moscow's war economy is now producing more than it needs, and Berlin is watching. When a country begins to prepare for war, it also begins to ask serious questions about what and who it can trust and where its gold is. Germany, a country not known for wild-eyed conspiracy theories or rash decisions, is once again making nervous noises about its gold held in the United States. The Bundesbank insist it's all fine, of course, just like they did before they very quietly brought home 300 tons from the Fed back in 2017. Now, politicians in Berlin are asking again, should we really leave billions of euros worth of gold in the vaults of a country whose own president called us freeloaders, whose current leadership is economically hostile to our industries, and whose political future looks increasingly improvisational? This isn't just about Germany. This is about a broader shift, a fundamental rethink of how the world treats gold, trust, and the question, whose gold is it really? So first, the obvious question, why do countries even store their gold abroad? Well, the short answer is history, convenience, and trust. After World War II, with much of Europe in ruins and the dollar ascendant, it made sense for countries to park their gold in the US. It gave them easy access to dollar liquidity in case of emergency. And the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, along with the Bank of England, became global custodians of gold reserves. For decades, this arrangement worked smoothly. Trust was high. America was the reliable sheriff of the Western financial system. But let's fast forward to today, and things, well, they're just not so clear-cut. Now, storing gold abroad increasingly looks like a relic of a more trusting, more stable time. And some central banks are quietly deciding, let's just have our gold a little bit closer to home, shall we? Germany holds the world's second largest gold reserves, and as of now, a chunky 37% of that, some 1,236 tons worth over 113 billion euros, is sitting in the New York Fed's vaults. And that arrangement might have seemed sensible during the Cold War, but today, less so. Politico is reporting that German politicians like Marco von der Witz and Markus Ferber are again questioning the wisdom of this setup. This echoes a 2013 campaign that actually embarrassed Angela Merkel into greenlighting repatriation efforts from France and the US. The Bundesbank, however, ever diplomatic, insists that everything is under control. President Joachim Nagel declared that he has complete confidence in the Fed. But then again, they said the same thing right before repatriating 674 tons between 2013 and 2017. And let's not forget, Germany is historically cautious with money and has always had a soft spot for gold. The Bundesbank may trust the Fed, but the people, they trust physical gold on Germany's soil. For centuries, gold has been the silent witness to humanity's financial follies. It sits in vaults, saying nothing, judging everything. And unlike politicians and fiat currencies, it keeps its promises. And perhaps that's why it's being summoned home by its owners after decades of comfortable exile in foreign vaults. The question that has brought us here today is deceptively simple. What happens when countries holding foreign reserves face the music of sovereign default? Or more specifically, what occurs when the custodian of your national treasure decides your treasure isn't quite as sacred as you thought? The answer, as it turns out, involves a fascinating dance of international law, geopolitical leverage, and the kind of financial engineering that would make Machiavelli proud. What really jolted the global gold conversation wasn't Trump or populism or Eurozone drama, it was Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the Western initial response wasn't tanks and sanctions. It included freezing roughly $300 billion of Russia's foreign reserves held in Western systems. So overnight, the illusion of financial neutrality shattered. Assets held in trusted systems could be frozen or just turned to dust with just a few signatures. And this wasn't the first time sovereign assets were frozen, of course. Iran, Venezuela, Afghanistan, the list of countries that have had their financial wings clipped is substantial. But Russia represented something different, a major power with significant integration into the global financial system. The implications weren't lost on Beijing, which holds over $1 trillion in US treasuries, nor were they lost on the Saudis, the Indians, or dozens of other nations suddenly confronting an uncomfortable question. Are our reserves truly ours? Gold isn't the only reserve asset under scrutiny. US Treasury bonds, once considered the safest of the safe, now look a little shaky. The US debt ceiling, standoffs, ballooning deficits, and hints of selective defaults have eroded confidence. The idea of a controlled default, where some creditors are stiffed while others are paid, is no longer far-fetched. Foreign holders in particular are starting to feel like they're holding the short end of the stick, and the numbers bear this out. China reduced its treasury holdings from 1.27 trillion in 2015 to just 759 billion in 2024. Japan and at least 19 other countries are following suit. For decades, the US Treasury bond has been the ultimate safe haven, what financial experts call the risk-free asset. This designation has always contained a certain irony, given that the issuer carries the world's largest debt burden. The arrangement worked splendidly for all involved. Surplus countries like China, Japan, and oil exporters recycled their dollars into treasuries, financing American consumption while maintaining dollar strength. The US enjoyed what a former French minister called an exorbitant privilege, the ability to print the world's reserve currency. But every financial arrangement contains the seeds of its own undoing. The Treasury bond paradox is simple. The more successful the US is at financing its deficit through foreign purchases, the more vulnerable it becomes to a sudden change in foreign appetite. Germany's not alone. Over the past decade, there's been a quiet but steady movement of countries bringing their gold home. In 2014, the Netherlands repatriated 122.5 tons from New York, cutting its reliance on the Federal Reserve. Austria, which once stored 80% of its reserves in London, shifted to a more balanced allocation, keeping 50% in Austria, 20% in Switzerland, and just 30% in London. Poland went a step further. In 2019, it carried out a covert operation to repatriate 8,000 bars of gold from the UK. Hungary didn't just bring its gold home from the Bank of England, it increased its holdings tenfold. Romania voted to bring back 60% of its reserves from the UK, and Slovakia has been vocal about repatriation, citing trust concerns. This isn't just about national pride, it's about control. In an uncertain world, countries want to know where their gold is, where they can see it, where they can get to it, how it's protected. Official explanations cite storage cost savings or diversification strategies, but the gold repatriation movement represents something profound, a crisis of trust in the international financial architecture that has underpinned global commerce since World War II. So what actually happens if either the country that owns the gold defaults or the country holding the gold runs into trouble? Well, let's take the first scenario. A country defaults on its debt, but its gold is sitting in a vault abroad, say in New York or London. Now, technically, that gold is protected under international law. Sovereign immunity means it's not supposed to be touched, but not supposed to and won't be are two very different things. Just ask Russia. In 2022, when sanctions hit, the West didn't seize Russia's central bank reserves. They just froze them. The result was the same. Hundreds of billions of dollars instantly turned into digital wallpaper. The gold stayed physically intact, untouched, technically, but it was no longer accessible. And suddenly, what was meant to be an untouchable reserve asset became a powerful piece on the geopolitical chessboard. Not seized, but not usable either. And the game theory here is exquisite. Conventional wisdom suggests sovereign gold enjoys immunity from seizure under international law. The 1976 Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act and similar legislation in other jurisdictions ostensibly protect state property from creditors. But as recent events have shown, when geopolitical imperatives clash with legal niceties, creative interpretations emerge with remarkable speed. Now let's flip that scenario. What happens if the custodian country, the one storing the gold, is the one that defaults or spirals into financial crisis? Well, in theory, Foreign-owned gold is legally segregated. Creditors shouldn't be able to touch it. But in a crisis, theory often gets sidelined. Capital controls can be introduced overnight. Emergency laws can block withdrawals or delay repatriation. And what starts as your gold in our vault can quickly become, we're going to need to hold on to that just a little bit longer. And when multiple countries start asking for their gold back at the same time, that's when you get the financial equivalent of a bank run, a run on the vaults. For central banks, the message is increasingly clear. Gold stored with another central bank carries counterparty risk. It doesn't matter if there's a treaty or an agreement. It doesn't matter if the foreign central bank confirms the gold is there. If a central bank can't access it when needed, it doesn't truly control it. And more central banks are acting on that realization. As trust in the dollar declines and the financial system becomes more fragmented, gold is emerging as the obvious alternative. It's not just about tradition anymore, it's about risk management. Basel III regulations gave gold a serious upgrade. And suddenly it's not just a shiny relic from history, it's good collateral, it's solid, it's uncorrupted, it's unfreezable. And the shift is happening fast. A 2023 Invesco survey found that 68% of central banks now prefer keeping their reserves at home. That's up from just 50% in 2020. The movement isn't limited to Europe anymore. Central banks in the Middle East, across Africa, and the BRICS blocs are all quietly moving in the same direction. Since 2010, central banks have transformed from net sellers of gold to significant net buyers. And this isn't just diversification, it's insurance against a changing financial order. Central banks added nearly 1,136 tons of gold to their reserves in 2022 alone, the highest level of annual purchases since 1967, when the dollar was still backed by gold. And they have continued to be net buyers ever since. What central bankers say publicly about these purchases differs markedly from what they discuss privately. Publicly, it's about portfolio diversification and long-term stability. Privately, it's about preparing for a post-dollar world and ensuring against frozen assets. Poland's central bank governor was refreshingly candid when he said gold will maintain its value even when someone cuts off the power to the global financial system. One wonders what scenario he was envisioning. The Bundesbank might still insist the Fed is a trustworthy custodian, but if they really believed that, why did they bring all of that gold home already? Why did they quietly stop at 37% instead of going all the way? Well, maybe they didn't want to rattle the markets, or maybe deep down, they know what many others now accept. In a fractured world, trust is a luxury, and physical control is peace of mind. So here we are, a world where alliances are fraying, where financial systems can be weaponized overnight, where risk-free no longer means what it used to, and where a central bank's gold isn't truly secure unless it can take physical possession when it needs to. The question isn't whether the Fed will seize Germany's gold. It probably won't. The question is, can Germany afford to be wrong? Especially now when Berlin's own intelligence services are sounding the alarm about potential conflict with Russia. When the military is preparing for long-term confrontation, when the stakes are no longer just economic but existential. Because in a world that runs on trust, the real reserve currency isn't dollars or gold, it's certainty. And right now, physical metal held in an independent vault might be the closest thing to it. As we navigate these uncertain waters, both nations and individuals would be wise to remember a few timeless principles. First up, diversification isn't just good portfolio theory. It's survival strategy in a world where financial weapons have been deployed and can be again. Secondly, possession matters. For central banks, the gap between legal ownership and physical control can become critically important, especially in a crisis when they need to get hold of that gold. Third, history rhymes. The specifics change, but the pattern of debt accumulation, currency debasement, and eventual reset has played out repeatedly across civilizations. The old saying among gold investors is that if you don't own gold, it's because you know exactly what will happen. You own gold because you know you can't possibly know what will happen. And if Germany, a nation with a long memory, serious planners, and a nervous eye on the East, is asking once again where its gold is and whether it's truly safe, maybe other countries should be asking the very same question. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, hit subscribe, and let's keep the conversation going.